Well, today I'm going on a bookstore crawl, I guess you could call it. Uh, there's a couple of bookstores in Omaha I'm going to visit, and then I found a new one. I don't know anything about it. It's called The Bookworm, and it says it has books, cards, gifts, and more. So I thought I'd check that one out. And there's the outside of the store. It looks pretty charming. So here we go. What I am looking for specifically today is a couple of Victorian novels or writers of that maybe I don't have or haven't read yet. I've got a couple of mysteries, new mysteries that are out that I want to try to find as well. And if I can help support a local bookstore, I'm going to check some of those first. But then one of the bookstores I'm looking forward to going to is down in the old market of Omaha. It's a used bookstore, but it's got a lot of books, a lot of old books. I can usually find something good there. So we'll hit that before we head home. But first stop, the bookworm. Well, I got in. I didn't do any recording inside, but yeah, I found a treasure. I think it's a biography of Thomas Hardy by Claire Tomlin. This one wasn't necessarily on my TBR list, but so it's kind of an impulse buy. But I've really enjoyed Thomas Hardy's books, and he's definitely someone in my mind I would want to get a biography on. Uh, Once I've read most of his books or all of his books, and I'm getting pretty close for Hardy. So yeah, that sounds like a great biography. I looked at some reviews online, and a lot of people were saying it was pretty good. So I'm excited to have found that, and it was right in line with what I was wanting to find today. So for Victober, I read Jude the Obscure, and that book broke me. I think that was sad. Oh my goodness, it just it it was good though. And that's what I like about Hardy. His books are tragic, but they're so well written that it's really an enjoyable read, if you could put it that way. Um, my favorite of his is Far from the Maddening Crowd, and that was the first one of his I read. And just about all the others I've read of his, I've thoroughly enjoyed. And Jude the Obscure I enjoyed, but the tragedy was a lot. And I'd say about halfway, I don't know what it is, three-fourths of the way through the novel, where the really big heartbreak event happens, which I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't read it, but I was like, wait, what just happened? Oh my goodness. And yeah, that I just finished the rest of the book. I couldn't stop. It it was very compelling. So was it a book I enjoyed? Yes, very much I enjoyed Jude the Obscure. As far as rereading it goes, I'm going to have to be in a pretty dark mood to pick it up again. But I mean, it's definitely a book I will want to revisit down the road, but not like, I'm reading Pickwick Papers right now. This is like the third or fourth time I've read it. And I know as soon as I'm done, I will think, oh man, I just want to read that again. That was fun. That was enjoyable. But yeah, Thomas Hardy, farther and few between, I think, for the reread. What a story. This guy who just tragedy just follows him around, and he's just trying to do the best he can, make it through, and one thing after another keeps happening to him. Begin to wonder if maybe he's cursed with bad luck or something. But some are probably mistakes of his own fault. Others are just life happens, and tragedy happens. I don't know. Why do we read such sad books? That's maybe a good question. Um, there's something about watching a person go through that and seeing their character and what they are made of that comes out during those moments. I don't know. I have to think about that because it almost seemed to me like, uh, so a little spoiler alert, but he goes through all these tragedies, and then in the end he dies, and you have left wondering what was the point of this. I don't know. I'll be thinking about Jude for a long time, but in the meantime, I got this great sounding biography, and can't wait to get it on my bookshelves. And someday, if you're lucky, I'll read you. All right, on to Barnes and Noble next. All right, I found exactly what I was looking for at Barnes and Noble. It's a cozy mystery. It's Mrs. Claus and the Evil Elves. This is part of the Mrs. Claus mystery series that features Mrs. Claus as the protagonist. She solves mysteries at the North Pole. There's two other books in the series that I've read that are just delightful. This is the third one. It's new. It's out this year, and it tells the story of April Claus, who marries a man named Nick, who turns out to be Santa Claus. So she's kind of a fish out of water type story as she's adjusting to life at the North Pole. And in this book, her friend Claire takes a visit up from Oregon. And if I remember right, in the last book, April was debating on whether or not to tell Claire the truth about who she married, because I think Claire was starting to suspect that Nick was a serial killer or something. I have to review the book now as to where we left off, but this I discovered through Kensington. I think they had connected with me for my Christmas podcast and wanted to know if there was any authors I'd be interested in interviewing, and I saw this series and thought, absolutely yes, this is the one I want. And so I had a chance to interview Liz on my podcast, and really a great book. So if you know, I'd highly recommend the series if you have people in your life who love Christmas and love mysteries and cozy mysteries. This is a great read. So yeah, the characters of the book are they're elves, they're Santa, they're Santa's family, all those just delightful characters that take place at a beautifully written and described North Pole. So this book, this book's about, it says April Claus is getting an early gift for her second Christmas in Santaland. Her dear friend Claire is visiting from Oregon, and April hopes to show off her adoptive country at its cozy, glittering best. But when the annual ice sculpture contest is derailed by a kamikaze drone deer, it's just the first in a series of unfestive events. Drone deer, created by inventor elf Blinky Brightlow, are none too popular with the genuine flesh and hoof kind, who are currently on strike. With no reindeer games to keep them in shape, Nick worries they may be getting too chunky to pull his sleigh come Christmas. Now Blinky is missing, his girlfriend Juniper is under suspicion, and between rogue reindeer and conniving elves, all of Santaland seems to have suddenly gone sugar plum crazy. Add a dash of murder to the mix, and suddenly April is battling not just to clear Juniper's name, but to save herself from being put on ice permanently. All right, well, that sounds fun. And that's just kind of wackiness these books have in them. And again, can I just say, a gorgeous cover. Sucker for covers. Here, sideways, you can see it. Absolutely gorgeous. Nice work, Kensington. That's one of the purchases I wanted to make today. I'm pretty happy to find that. So I can scratch that off my to-do list. Where to next? None other than Half Price Books, where I'm going to be browsing. Then I'm going to pick up some lunch from a lovely little British bakery that is here in Omaha, and then on to another bookstore. So I stopped at a place called Chippy's and got a sandwich called a sausage buddy. Yeah, I guess it's just sausages on a buttered roll. It sounded good. Something along with something for the side would be it's called HP sauce. Don't know what that is, but it smelled good for like the condiment for it. So I'm gonna have a lunch. I got a very American cup of black coffee from the Starbucks nearby, and I'm going to enjoy this British repast. And then I think something else. It had beans in a pastry. I can't remember what it's called now, but that sounded good too. And I'm going to have to eat in my car because it's cold and raining outside right now, and I have nowhere else to eat. So yeah, so that'll be fun. It's good British weather for some good British food. And then it's on to another bookstore. All right, that was delicious. The sausage buddy was delicious. It's basically like sausages cut in half on a bun, lightly toasted with butter. I'm assuming that's where the name buddy comes from, short for butter. And then I think it was called a bean bag. It was basically baked beans inside of a pastry with like cheese kind of on top. That was really good. And then for the sauce, I had something called HP sauce, which I'd never heard of. Thought, is that Harry Potter? No, but it's you can kind of see that some of it on there. It's I would say it's closer to barbecue sauce than it would be to like ketchup, and it has a nice, almost sour tang to it. But it was really good to add onto the especially the sandwich. The sausage buddy was excellent. So I was at a place called Chippy's in Omaha, and I think they have a couple of stores in the Nebraska, and then I think in Iowa there's a few more coming open. A lovely little store. I was able to snatch a couple of pictures, but I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be awkward and obvious in what I was doing there. The store was pretty busy. So Chippy's is right next door to Half Price Books in Omaha, so I had to stop in there. And I didn't find, I was looking for some Ray Bradbury books, some newer editions or better editions of a few that I have that are really falling apart. I didn't find anything there worth getting, but I did come across selections from George Eliot's letters, which I've been on, like I mentioned, I'm looking for some Victorian reads, and that definitely will fit right in what I was looking for. Again, another impulse buy, but I think I'll enjoy this. Looks like the man who edited the letters together wanted to edit them together in such a way to tell like an overall narrative of her story, of her life. So I was really excited to find this. Now that I own most of the books of my favorite Victorian writers, I've been trying to find biographies about them, and especially like collections of their letters. I'm really interested in that. I've got one by Dickens. I've got one of his letters. I've got, I think, is it Jane Austen? I have to check my bookshelves now, but yeah, I think I have a Jane Austen one. Now I've got a George Eliot letters, and I want to find. I know Elizabeth Gaskell has one, and I want to find a copy of hers also. I could probably just find something online, but if you know of any, let me know if there's a good copy or good edition. I think I've been having a hard time finding some for her, which is too bad because she's one of the best Victorian writers I've read, and people should read her more and have more stuff about her published. So, side note, just a shameless plug here. Reminder that in April I'm going to have a whole month dedicated to Elizabeth Gaskell, um, calling it Gaskell in April. For lack of a better title. Maybe Gaskapril, which is still kind of awkward to say, but I really want to help promote her works and her life. I think that she deserves more attention. So I'll be talking about that. I'll be doing a joint read or a buddy read with everyone, whoever wants to, of North and South is the book we're going to be considering in April. So, plan your rereads and reads accordingly. But yeah, so I was really excited to find this. All right, one more stop, and we're going to go to a lovely, lovely bookstore in the old market of Omaha, and I'll see what I can find there. All right, I just got to Jackson Street Booksellers and couldn't spend as much time there as I wanted to. I forgot about the parking downtown has the meters, and they don't have debit card readers on them, so I only had about 35 cents in change, which was enough for about 17 minutes of time, so I had to make it a quick run. But I did. I managed to find 3 books, probably slightly more expensive than I should have paid for, but that's okay. One of them was kind of an impulse buy. I found a Jane Austen biography by David Noakes. I hadn't heard of this one, and one thing I learned about Dickens is when I finished reading all of his novels, it was kind of sad because then I couldn't, there was no new work. But then I realized there is a whole publishing industry of nonfiction surrounding Dickens that I can now read freely because there won't be any spoilers. Because I've read them all, except for some of the short stories and some of his nonfiction I haven't read yet. But so I began collecting Dickens biographies and works on his literature, like scholarly articles, things like that. And it's been so fun. I've got almost a full small bookshelf full of books about Dickens. And so now I've started collecting some of that same kind of work from some of my other favorite classic authors. So I found this biography by Jane Austen, and then I also found one. This one was actually on my TBR list that I didn't have yet. Jane Austen, The Secret Radical by Helena Kelly. I've heard about this one. In part of this as a biography, according to the book, it also um, it examines her work in its context and how much of a radical, she would have been, pushing the line of what was, society's accepted standards. She was saying, pushing that line and saying we can do better, we can go farther, and which, if you don't mind me bringing up that Persuasion adaptation, I think on another booktuber channel they said that that was probably what was wrong about that movie, and I can't remember which booktuber said it, but that they tried to go too far and radicalize her work too far than what it was intended. But anyway, I'm looking forward to this one especially, and I don't know if I'll wait till Jane Austen July to read it or just read it sometime here soon. And then, speaking of letters, I found this one, The Brontes, A Life in Letters, and it's compiled by Juliet Barker, who wrote, I think she wrote that big mammoth Bronte biography. And this one will contain a lot of the Brontes' letters, basically telling their life story in their own words, which I'm really looking forward to reading this now. I can't remember what books of letters I have already. I need to keep better track. I know I don't have this one though. There might be some footnotes and notes and things that will make this even more interesting. Now, Jackson Street Sellers usually has a lot of books about Dickens too. That's where I found a lot of my of the Dickens biographies and things. But today they didn't have anything other than just Dickens's novels, and I didn't really see any edition that I liked better than the ones I already have. So, and no Christmas Carol edition. I've been kind of collecting different editions of that work. Yeah, so that was my my trip today. Hitting some bookstores, a nice little book haul. I haven't had one in a while. I had some birthday money tucked away for just such a rainy day. So it was just a wonderfully refreshing day. I was able to just enjoy myself. This past week's been pretty difficult. I had a really busy, crazy, stressful weekend, and woke up this morning with some of my chronic neck pain was flaring up because the weather changed, most likely, and I just needed to get out and get refreshed. And exploring bookstores really did that for me today, as well as having a little bit of a Victorian treat. Not really, but it's about as close as I can get here in the middle of America. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you have a British market nearby, tell me about it. What kind of things they have there. At the one I went to, Chippy's, they have some really neat coffee mugs, some souvenir type things, British tea, some British groceries, and then freshly baked and made British food. Couple ones I want to try next is something called Bangers and Mash. I've heard it referred to. I don't know what it is. And then they also make steak and kidney pie. And I was hoping it was steak and kidney beans, but it looks like it's steak and actual kidney. And I'm not a big fan of the, I don't know what they call it, like the guts. Some people with their turkey, the giblets, I guess they're called, all the innards, they'll mix it up into the stuffing, and I'm not really a big fan of that. So I'm not so sure about that one. And this is funny. Any of my viewers who live in England are probably like, "Yeah, this guy's getting crazy over what essentially amounts to ketchup, or toast or whatever." But I don't know. It's a culture that fascinates me, and I really would love to get to England someday and just do some visiting, especially all the bookish museums and sites and places like that. I want to go to the Bronte Parsonage. I want to go to the Dickens Museum, the Jane Austen Museum, especially places like that. Yeah, that's on my bucket list one day. Probably won't happen for a few years yet, but we'll see. All right. Well, I'm going to go inside. It's still raining, still cold out. I'm going to snuggle with my new dog and read some books. And all right, stay tuned. I'll see you next time.